As we head everlong into Natlan, Foo Fighters, by the way, fully intended that word choice, there is one thing we must keep in mind. While on the surface they may seem like an unga-bunga people who've been fighting an endless war for thousands of years amongst themselves, or that's what they were alleged to be, Fontaine is a nation that was simply obsessed with justice and nothing more. However, after completing the story, we learn there's a dark reason they longed for justice. So, similarly to how the Nation of Justice had an ulterior, hidden motive being the driving factor for all the court cases in the land, something else could be the reason all the Natlansians, and eventually even the captain himself, are fighting one another, and it most likely has to do something with the tournament. The Capitano has both agreed and not agreed to fight in. From the perspective of Nervalet, Capitano will be fighting in it. Or, well, he'll be fighting in something.
There is one other piece of information I got incidentally from my negotiations with the Knave that I believe may be useful to you. The Harbinger known as the Captain has thrown his hat into the endless ring of war.
Has thrown his hat into the endless ring of war. It sounds like dried ink, not gonna lie, but then in the Ignition trailer, when goaded by Mavuika as to his participation in the upcoming tourney, he simply grunts a mighty grunt.
Are you brave enough to compete?
Now, in hindsight, I'm not really sure what I was expecting here. Mavuika is asking a layered question, and I was just expecting him to respond to it. Like, well, why, yes, my fair maiden, I shall indeed partake in the activities when the appointed hour arrives. As you may well be informed, I have proclivities for all things combat. Simply ignoring the trifling question asked by who could very well be the Archon of the land was probably the better choice. I mean, are you brave enough to compete? Those are fighting words. Me personally, I wouldn't have it. I would have smited the bitch right then and there. Can't disrespect me in my set, my nigga. Now, to be fair, it could be this interaction with Capitano and Mavuika predates our conversation with Nervalet. In any case, Capitano's reserved response to the Pyro Archon pushes us to really look at the tournaments. By that I mean, what's its true purpose? While yes, we've been told the Natlansians of old would hold rites of combat in the Pyro Archon's name, we are no longer in times of old. And what I mean by that is, holding an event in the name of your god inspires people to be the best version of themselves, become the strongest so they can gain the favor of their deity. I'd imagine there was a healthy dose of vanity and ego involved in these events, as people may have been eager to prove themselves the strongest. So, in that regard, those rites of old may very well have been about showing whose tribe was the strongest in the name of the fire god Murata. Nowadays, things are a bit different. Gone are the hardy tribesmen and women of yesteryear, and in are the baby-back bitches of today.
Leave me alone!
Not a single hint of excitement can be gleaned from the supposed participants of the tourney, some even going so far as to ask if they have to.
What the heck is that? Do I have to?
On the flip, the only one who doesn't appear to be competing, Mavuika, a likely candidate for the Pyro Archon, is excited and urging all competitors to perform their best and promising the winner the lofty prize of all. So, if not for the sake of fighting, why then is this tournament happening? Perhaps our answer lies with Fontaine. Much like Natlan, Fontaine had its own ideal it was obsessed with, and that was justice. Justice dominated every facet of life. There were random laws, spectacles of court cases, and even a Udex. This obsession with justice and trials is, but to a few, simply what the nation was about. What's good is a highly developed court system if it's never put to use. But why was this highly developed court system established in the first place? Why the obsession with courts and laws? The answer: the Hydro Authority. This was the hidden ulterior motive driving Fontaine to be what it was. You see, in every court case held in Fontaine, there was served another purpose aside from actually being a trial. They fed the Oratrice Indemnitium. Man, but what is that word? Why are there so many N's and M's and Y's? I don't know, bro. I don't know, bro. So as to allow the Hydro Archon who was hidden within to create a weapon powerful enough to break the Divine Throne and return the Hydro Authority back to the Hydro Sovereign, so he could then avert the worst form of the prophecy. This is why Fontaine became the far-flung justice-seeking nation it became. While it was ultimately all to serve the greater good, to some, namely Nervalet, it was still a bit extreme.
This is a topic that has been discussed ad nauseum.
I don't mean to condescend to humanity, but it is quite clear to me that society's concepts of justice, fairness, equality, and rule of law are not equivalent, and never can be. Now, of course, water always seeks its own level, and it was in this spirit that the previous Hydro Archon, Egeria, hoped to achieve universal equality by connecting all things with love. Her successor chose instead to seek equality by means of the law. Ultimately, due to various external factors, this unfortunately manifested itself in the distorted form of trials for the sake of trials. Nevertheless, there are reasons for everything. I suppose I should refrain from criticizing her.
So see what I mean? On the surface, Fontaine is simply a nation that loves courtroom dramas, and the Hydro Archon made the Oratrice for the sole purpose of handing out verdicts. In reality, the Oratrice was constructing a weapon fit to destroy one of the Divine Thrones, and all the court cases needed to happen to charge it up. So similarly, whilst we head into Natlan assuming they simply love to fight, what is all the fighting really for? And does the true purpose behind it explain Capitano's grunt? If we're being frank, it's tough to nigh impossible to say right now. I mean, look, before the final 3 acts of the Archon quest, we hardly had any information on Divine Thrones and had no information on Elemental Authority, so who knows what kind of new shit we're going to get introduced to in Natlan's quest. Now, with that said, all hope's not lost, my friends, because we may have some inkling of knowledge thanks to Mavuika's words regarding fate.
What our eyes see ought to be our fate. But now, close your eyes and feel. For with our blood, we will forge our true fate.
Now, fate is an interesting topic within Teyvat that's been picking up a lot of steam recently, thanks to Erminsol's rival, the Loom of Fate, now being completed. With many groups in Teyvat honing in on Celestia's ability to control fates, they've decided to take action to achieve their own true fates. The Abyss Order created the Loom of Fate, and Mavuika, it seems, is preparing to fight her own fight and achieve her own true fate forged of blood. Now, given the heavenly principles are the ones that control fate, it'd be reasonable to assume at this time she'd be fighting them. But how can a singular Archon take on the might of the heavenly principles? The answer is they most certainly can't, unless they were currently working towards something, a plan that would allow them to at least make it a fair fight. Perhaps this plan involves fire, a special primal fire which only seems to burn around the tournaments. You know, I swear I've seen flames being used to combat fate or Erminsol somewhere else in this game before.
So, where's the segment in the prime of his life, then?
He's busy with a little experiment in blasphemy.
Nah, but who knows? Realistically, I'm sure the plan involves the primal flame, Xbalanque fates this dungeon, and, you know, the problem is how one arranges the puzzle pieces is up to them. Flames engulf the thrones, you know, something like that. Maybe it's some dark shit, like the losers of the tournaments get sacrificed to the flame and it grows in power. Wouldn't that be fun? Maybe that's why the tournament is for winners only. Maybe that's why Mavuika asked the captain if he was brave enough to enter, and maybe that's why the captain simply grunted.